I'm Clara, and I'm 28 years old. My parents just told me to give away my wedding gift card to my sister Alice because she deserves it more than me. The words hit me like a slap across the face, standing there in my wedding dress with my new in-laws watching in horror. Let me back up. 3 hours earlier, I was the happiest woman alive. Michael's parents had just presented me with keys to a brand new Honda Civic, saying I was like a legitimate daughter to them. Their eyes actually welled up when they said it. For someone who'd never owned a car, who'd been taking 3 buses to work for years while supporting my entire family, it felt like Christmas morning. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt like the family disappointment. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Now, you might wonder how a family ends up this twisted. Well, let me paint you a picture. When I was 19, Dad had an accident at the construction site, broke his leg in 3 places, injured his back. Workers' comp barely covered the medical bills, let alone our mortgage. Mom had been a housewife for 20 years, no work experience. Someone had to step up. That someone was me. I dropped out of college mid-semester, said goodbye to my accounting degree, and started job hunting. While my friends were pledging sororities and cramming for finals, I was learning to code from library books and YouTube videos. Turns out I had a natural talent for technology. Within 6 months, I landed an entry-level position at a software company. My boss, Jennifer, was impressed by how quickly I picked things up. "You're wasted in data entry," she told me after my first performance review. "I want to move you to our development team." The promotion came with a 30% salary increase. Finally, I thought, things were looking up. That's when my parents made it clear what my role would be. "You're so good with money," Mom said, handing me a stack of bills. "Since you're doing so well, you can handle the household expenses." Just like that, I became the primary breadwinner for a family of 4. Well, 3 adults and 1 spoiled princess. See, while I was sacrificing my education and social life, Alice was living her best college experience. Dorm parties, spring break trips, joining clubs, dating. I paid for her dorm, her meal plan, her textbooks. When she called home, it was never to check on Dad's recovery or ask how I was holding up. It was always, "Clara, I need money for this," or "Clara, can you cover that?" The worst part wasn't the money, though. It was the complete lack of acknowledgement. When Alice's friends visited, she introduced me as my sister who works in computers, not my sister who's putting me through college, or my sister who kept our family afloat, just the sister with the boring job. But I convinced myself it was temporary. Once Alice graduated and got her marketing degree, she'd start contributing. We'd be a team. We'd take care of Mom and Dad together. Looking back now, I realize how naive I was. Because when Alice did graduate, she didn't see our parents as her responsibility. She saw them as mine. Alice got her first real job the summer after graduation. Marketing coordinator at a boutique agency downtown, decent starting salary. I was so proud of her and honestly, relieved. Finally, I thought, I wouldn't be carrying this burden alone. The first red flag should have been when she spent her entire first paycheck on a designer handbag. "I need to look professional," she explained when I saw the shopping bags. "Image is everything in marketing." Her second paycheck went to a weekend trip to Nashville with her sorority sisters. Her third funded a complete wardrobe overhaul. Meanwhile, I was still covering the mortgage, utilities, groceries, Dad's physical therapy copays, and Mom's prescription medications. When I gently suggested Alice might start contributing to household expenses, she looked at me like I'd suggested she donate a kidney. "Clara, I'm just getting started in my career," she said, applying expensive moisturizer she couldn't afford. "I need to establish myself first. Besides, you're already handling everything so well." That phrase, "you're already handling everything so well," became the family's favorite excuse. Dad used it when I suggested he look into remote work opportunities. Mom used it when I mentioned feeling overwhelmed. Alice used it whenever the topic of financial responsibility came up. The thing about being reliable is that people start taking your reliability for granted. What began as temporary assistance became permanent expectation. What started as gratitude evolved into entitlement. And somehow, I'd become the family's unofficial CEO, responsible for keeping everyone else's dreams afloat while mine collected dust. The breaking point came during Alice's first Christmas break. She announced she was spending the holidays in Aspen with her college friends. "It's a networking opportunity," she insisted. "My friend's family has connections in the industry." I was working double shifts that week to cover holiday bonuses for Mom and Dad, plus Alice's student loan payment that she'd somehow forgotten to make. When I asked if she'd be contributing anything toward Christmas gifts or the family dinner, she laughed. "Clara, You know I don't have disposable income right now. I'm saving up to move out of my apartment and into something more professional. Image matters in my field. Image. Always image. Never substance, never sacrifice, never stepping up when your family needs you. Just image. That night, I sat in my studio apartment, the same cramped space I'd been living in for 6 years, because I couldn't afford anything better while supporting everyone else, and did some math. In the 7 years since Dad's accident, I'd contributed over $200,000 to my family's survival. Alice had contributed exactly zero, but I told myself things would change. She just needed more time to get established. Once she moved up in her career, once she matured a bit more, she'd understand her responsibilities. I was still making excuses for people who had stopped making excuses for themselves. 2 years later, I met Michael at a tech conference. He was presenting on sustainable business practices, and I was there representing my company's new environmental initiative. During the coffee break, he approached me about the app prototype I'd been demonstrating. This could revolutionize how small businesses track their carbon footprint, he said, studying my tablet screen with genuine interest. Have you considered licensing this technology? Most men at these conferences wanted to explain my own code to me. Michael wanted to understand it. We ended up talking for 3 hours, missing half the afternoon sessions. He was smart, funny, and had this way of listening that made me feel heard, really heard for the first time in years. Our first date was supposed to be dinner, but we ended up at a 24-hour diner, talking until sunrise. Michael told me about his work consulting for eco-friendly startups. I told him about my app development projects. What I didn't tell him, at least not yet, was that I'd been financially supporting my family for nearly a decade. When I finally did open up about my situation, Michael's reaction surprised me. He didn't lecture me about enabling my family or suggest I was being taken advantage of. Instead, he asked, "What do you want to happen?" The question caught me off guard. Nobody had asked what I wanted in so long, I'd almost forgotten I was allowed to want things. "I want them to be okay," I said automatically. "That's not what I asked," Michael said gently. "I asked what you want. I want to finish my degree. I want to travel somewhere that requires a passport. I want to wake up on a Saturday morning and not immediately check my bank balance. I want to buy groceries without calculating which bills I'll have to postpone." The wants poured out of me like water from a broken dam. Michael listened to all of it without judgment, without trying to fix me or tell me what I should do. He just listened. "You know," he said finally, "wanting things for yourself doesn't make you selfish. It makes you human." Meeting Michael's family was like stepping into an alternate universe. His parents, Robert and Susan, owned a successful consulting firm together. They asked about my work, my goals, my opinions on everything from technology trends to book recommendations. They remembered details from previous conversations and followed up on projects I'd mentioned. At their Sunday dinners, nobody expected me to clean up alone or serve others first. Nobody made jokes about my career or questioned my life choices. When I mentioned I was thinking about going back to school to finish my degree, Susan immediately started researching programs and sent me information on scholarships. "Clara's brilliant," Michael told them during one dinner. "She taught herself programming languages that most people need years of formal education to master." "Self-taught often means more creative problem-solving," Robert agreed. "Traditional education has its place, but curiosity and determination are harder to teach." I almost cried right there at their dining room table. After years of being treated like the family workhorse, here were people who saw my potential instead of just my utility. The contrast became even more stark when Michael met my family. The first thing my mother said to him was, "I hope you realize Clara is very committed to taking care of us. That won't change just because she's dating someone. Not nice to meet you. Or, we've heard wonderful things about you." Just a warning that their claim on my life took priority over any relationship I might try to build. Alice was even worse. She spent the entire dinner monopolizing the conversation, talking about her latest promotion and her new apartment in the trendy part of town. When Michael asked about my work, Alice interrupted with, "Oh, Clara's always been the practical one. I'm more of the creative type." Practical. There was that word again. The polite way of saying, useful, but not interesting. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Like you exist only to serve their needs while your own dreams don't matter? Drop a comment below and let me know. Michael saw right through their dynamic. After dinner, as we walked to his car, he was quiet for a long time. "They don't see you," he said finally. "What do you mean?" "Your family. They don't see who you are. They only see what you do for them." He was right, of course, but admitting it felt like betraying them somehow. After all, they needed me. What kind of daughter abandons her family when they're struggling? "Maybe," I said, not ready to examine that truth too closely. Clara, Michael stopped walking and turned to face me. You deserve people who value you for who you are, not just what you can provide. Standing there under the streetlight, I felt something shift inside me. For the first time in years, I imagined what it might feel like to be valued instead of just useful. Michael's proposal came 18 months later, during a weekend trip to Napa Valley. We were having dinner at a small vineyard restaurant when he got down on one knee and asked me to build a life with him. The ring was perfect, a vintage setting with a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. Not flashy, but elegant and thoughtful, just like him. I love how you see the world, he said, his voice steady despite the attention we were drawing from other diners. I love your intelligence, your determination, your incredible capacity for caring about others. But most of all, I love how you make me want to be better. Will you marry me? Through happy tears, I said yes. The other diners applauded. The waiter brought champagne, and for a few perfect hours, I felt like the luckiest woman alive. The engagement celebration with my family the next week was a different story entirely. When I showed them the ring, my mother's first comment was, "Well, it's not very big, is it?" "Size isn't everything, Mom," I said, trying to keep the hurt out of my voice. "Of course not, dear. I just expected something more substantial from someone who can afford it." She examined the ring more closely. "Is it even real?" Alice leaned over to look. "It's cute," she said in the tone people use for children's artwork. "Very vintage." Meanwhile, Dad was grilling Michael about his financial prospects. "Software consulting can be unstable," he said, as if he hadn't been unemployed for nearly a decade. "How do we know you can provide for Clara?" Michael handled their interrogation with grace, answering every inappropriate question about his income, his business prospects, and his family's wealth. But I could see the tension in his jaw, the way his smile became more forced as the evening wore on. The worst part came when we started discussing wedding plans. My vision was simple, a small ceremony with close friends and family, followed by dinner at a nice restaurant. Nothing extravagant, just meaningful. "But what about Alice?" my mother interjected. "She's your maid of honor, obviously. She'll need a dress, shoes, hair, makeup, and the bachelorette party. Alice has been planning it since you got engaged." I hadn't asked Alice to be my maid of honor. I hadn't even thought about a bachelorette party. But suddenly, my wedding was becoming another opportunity for Alice to be the center of attention. "Actually," I said carefully, "I was thinking of asking my friend Jennifer from work to be my maid of honor. We've been through a lot together." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Jennifer?" My mother's voice was ice cold. "A work friend over your own sister?" "She's one of my closest friends, Mom. She's supported me through some really difficult times." "Well, I suppose Clara's always been closer to outsiders than to her own family," Alice said, managing to sound both hurt and accusatory. The guilt hit me like a physical blow. Here I was, planning the happiest day of my life, and somehow I was the villain for wanting to choose my own wedding party. "Alice can be a bridesmaid," I compromised, hating myself for backing down. "But Jennifer is my maid of honor." The conversation moved on to other details, but the damage was done. What should have been a celebration of my engagement had become another reminder that my choices were subject to family approval. Later that night, Michael and I debriefed in my apartment. "They're going to try to take over your wedding," he said bluntly. "They're just excited for me." "Clara?" He took my hands in his. "They spent the entire evening talking about what Alice needed and what your parents expected. Nobody asked what you wanted." He was right. Again. But the wedding was still months away. I had time to set boundaries, to make sure my voice was heard. Looking back now, I can see how naive that hope was. Because if there's one thing my family excelled at, it was wearing down my resistance until I gave them what they wanted. The next 8 months of wedding planning were a masterclass in emotional manipulation. Every decision became a battle. Every boundary I tried to set was met with tears, guilt trips, or accusations of selfishness. The venue? My parents insisted on their country club, despite the fact that I'd never been a member and felt uncomfortable in that environment. "It's where respectable families hold their weddings," my mother declared. "What will people think if you get married in some trendy downtown loft?" The guest list? Somehow, it ballooned from 50 people to 120, most of whom were my parents' friends and business associates. People I'd met maybe twice in my life were suddenly essential attendees. "Networking is important, Clara," Dad explained when I questioned why his former boss from 15 years ago was invited. "You never know what connections might help Michael's business." The most ridiculous battle was over the wedding cake. I wanted something simple vanilla with raspberry filling. Elegant, but not ostentatious. Alice had other ideas. "What about a 3-tier chocolate fountain?" she suggested during one planning session. Or those trendy naked cakes with fresh flowers. Something Instagram-worthy. I don't want Instagram-worthy, I said firmly. I want something we'll actually enjoy eating. Clara, this is your wedding, Alice said with exaggerated patience. Don't you want it to be memorable? The implication was clear. My preferences weren't memorable enough. My vision wasn't special enough. I needed Alice's creative input to make my own wedding worthy of attention. Michael was getting increasingly frustrated with the family dynamics. This is supposed to be our day, he said after a particularly contentious phone call about flower arrangements. Why does it feel like we're planning their wedding? They're just trying to help, I said automatically, though I was starting to question that myself. Clara, helping would be asking what you want and supporting your choices. This is something else entirely. The breaking point came during the final dress fitting. I'd chosen a simple but elegant gown, nothing too flashy, just classic and timeless. I felt beautiful in it, confident and happy. Alice came with me to the fitting, ostensibly for moral support. But the moment the seamstress stepped away to get pins, Alice started her critique. Are you sure about this style? She asked, circling me like a vulture. It's very safe. Safe is fine, I said, watching myself in the three-way mirror. I feel good in it. But it's your wedding day. Don't you want to make a statement? What kind of statement? I don't know. Something that shows you're confident, successful. This dress says reliable office worker, not bride. There it was again. Reliable. The backhanded compliment that had followed me my entire adult life. Maybe I am a reliable office worker, I said quietly. Clara, come on. You're marrying a successful consultant. His family has money, connections. This is your chance to show you belong in that world. Show I belonged. As if I were an imposter trying to fake my way into legitimacy. As if Michael's love wasn't proof enough that I belonged wherever he was. The seamstress returned with her pins, and I stood silently while she made final adjustments. But Alice's words had planted seeds of doubt. Was my dress too simple? Was I not sophisticated enough for Michael's world? Was I embarrassing him without realizing it? That night, I called Michael in tears. She's in my head, I confessed. What if she's right? What if I'm not enough for your family? Clara, stop. His voice was firm but gentle. My parents adore you exactly as you are. They've told me multiple times how lucky I am to find someone so genuine and intelligent. But what if? No what ifs. Do you love your dress? Yes. Do you feel beautiful in it? Yes. But then that's all that matters. Alice's opinion is irrelevant. He was right, of course, but the damage was done. The confidence I'd felt in my choices was shaken. The joy I should have been feeling was clouded by self-doubt. Looking back, I realized that was the point. Alice couldn't stand the idea of me being completely happy, completely confident. She needed me to doubt myself so she could position herself as the expert, the one with better taste and judgment. It was a pattern that had been going on for years, but I was finally starting to see it clearly. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful. Michael's parents had given me a spa day the week before, so I felt relaxed and pampered. Jennifer had arrived the night before and was handling all the maid of honor duties with perfect efficiency. Everything should have been perfect. But at 11 a.m., 2 hours before the ceremony, my mother called with an emergency. Clara, we have a problem, she said without preamble. Your father's suit doesn't fit properly, the pants are too long, and the jacket is tight across the shoulders. Did you try the emergency tailor service? They can't see him until Monday. Clara, he can't walk you down the aisle looking sloppy. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Mom, what do you want me to do? I'm getting my hair done. Alice found a solution. She knows someone who can alter the suit this morning, but they need $200 cash. None of us have that kind of money on hand. Of course they didn't. And of course, the solution involved me providing money I didn't have budgeted for this weekend. Can't Michael's parents help? Clara, we can't ask them for money. What would they think of us? What they'd think is that my family was manipulative and financially irresponsible, which would be accurate. But instead of saying that, I found myself asking Jennifer to drive to an ATM to withdraw the cash. This is ridiculous, Jennifer said as we waited in the bank line. Your dad has had months to make sure his suit fit properly. I know, but what choice do I have? You could let him deal with the consequences of his poor planning. The idea of my father looking disheveled at my wedding was more than I could handle. Not because I cared about appearances, but because I knew my family would somehow make it my fault if anything went wrong. Jennifer delivered the money to my parents while I finished getting ready. When she returned, her expression was grim. Clara, your sister wasn't at the tailor. What do you mean? I mean, Alice was at the nail salon getting a manicure when I dropped off the money. Your parents knew exactly where she was. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. They'd lied about Alice being the one to find a solution. They'd manipulated me into paying for their poor planning by making it seem like Alice was being helpful. How do you know? I saw her through the window when I drove past. She waved at me. I sat down heavily in the bridal suite chair, still in my robe with my hair half finished. They lied to me, I said quietly. Yes, they did. On my wedding day. Yes. I stared at my reflection in the vanity mirror. In a few hours, I'd be Clara Patterson, starting a new chapter of my life with a man who valued and respected me. But first, I had to get through a ceremony surrounded by people who saw me as an ATM with feelings. Jennifer? Yeah? After today, things are going to be different. She smiled at me in the mirror. Good. I didn't know exactly what that meant yet, but I could feel something shifting inside me. The old Clara, the one who absorbed everyone's problems and sacrificed her own needs, was getting married today. But she wasn't going on the honeymoon. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Michael looked devastated when he saw me walking down the aisle, and I felt that familiar flutter of love and certainty. This was right. He was right. We were right. But it was during the reception, when his parents presented me with the car keys, that everything changed. Clara, Susan said, tears in her eyes, you've been like the daughter we never had. We know how much you've sacrificed for your family, and we want you to have something that's just yours. A car. My own car. After years of taking 3 buses to work, of walking to the grocery store, of being dependent on others for transportation, it was more than a gift, it was freedom. I was crying as I hugged Robert and Susan, overwhelmed by their generosity and kindness. For a moment, I felt purely happy, purely grateful. That's when my parents appeared at my side. Clara, my mother said, her voice artificially sweet, we need to talk to you privately. And just like that, I knew my fairy tale was about to end. My parents cornered me near the dessert table, away from Michael's family and most of the guests. Dad cleared his throat uncomfortably while Mom put on her most reasonable expression, the one she used when she was about to ask for something outrageous. Honey, that was such a lovely gesture from the Pattersons, Mom began, glancing around to make sure we weren't overheard. They're very generous people. Yes. They are, I said carefully, already sensing where this was heading. The thing is, Dad jumped in, Alice is starting her new job next month. The one downtown with the advertising agency? I nodded. Alice had landed a position with better pay and benefits, something she'd been working toward for months. I'd even helped her practice for the interview. Well, she's going to need reliable transportation, Mom continued. You know how unreliable public transit can be, especially for someone trying to make a good impression at a new company. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. What exactly are you asking? We think it would be wonderful if you gave Alice the car, Mom said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. After all, you've been taking the bus for years. You're used to it, but Alice needs to project success in her new role. I stared at them, speechless. They wanted me to give away my wedding gift, a symbol of love and independence from my new in-laws, to my sister who had never contributed a single dollar to our family's welfare. You can't be serious, I said quietly. Clara, be reasonable, Dad said, using his stern father voice. Alice deserves this opportunity. She's worked hard to get where she is. Where she is. Where Alice was, specifically, was debt-free with a new job and a future full of possibilities, all subsidized by my decade of sacrifice. Where I was finally, for the first time in my adult life, receiving something that was purely mine. She deserves it more than you do, Mom added, as if that settled the matter. Those words hit me like a physical blow. After everything I'd done, everything I'd given up, everything I'd provided, my own mother stood there and told me my sister deserved my wedding gift more than I did. More than me, I repeated, my voice hollow. Well, yes. Alice is just starting out. You're established now. You have Michael to take care of you. There it was. The assumption that had guided their treatment of me for years. I existed to serve until someone else could take over that responsibility. My value was purely utilitarian. I looked around the reception, taking in the scene. Michael was talking with his college friends near the bar, completely unaware of the ambush happening by the dessert table. Alice was posing for photos with the bridesmaids, laughing and holding a champagne flute. Jennifer was dancing with her husband, finally relaxing after months of helping me navigate wedding planning drama. Clara? Mom's voice had an edge now. We're waiting for an answer. What do you think I should have said? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. But before I could respond, I felt a warm hand on my shoulder. Michael had appeared beside me, and from his expression, I could tell he'd overheard enough to understand what was happening. "I'm sorry," he said politely to my parents, "but I need to steal my wife for a moment. They're about to cut the cake." He guided me away from my parents, but not before I saw the flash of annoyance cross Mom's face. She wasn't finished with this conversation, and we all knew it. "How much did you hear?" I asked as we walked toward the cake table. "Enough." His jaw was tight. "They want you to give Alice the car. They think she deserves it more than I do." Michael stopped walking and turned to face me fully. "Clara, look at me. Do you want to give Alice that car?" "No," I said without hesitation. "I've never wanted anything that was mine so badly in my life." "Then don't." "But they'll be furious. They'll say I'm being selfish." "Let them be furious. Let them say whatever they want. That car is yours." Standing there in my wedding dress, surrounded by friends and family who were supposed to be celebrating the happiest day of my life, I felt something crystallize inside me, a clarity I'd never experienced before. Michael was right. The car was mine. The gift was mine. The choice was mine. For the first time in my adult life, I was going to say no. The cake-cutting ceremony passed in a blur. I smiled and posed for photos while my mind raced through possible scenarios. How would my parents react when I refused their demand? What would Alice say? How long would they punish me for this act of defiance? But underneath the anxiety was something else, a growing sense of righteous anger. The audacity of asking me to give away my wedding gift was staggering, even by my family's standards. The casual cruelty of declaring Alice more deserving cut deeper than any previous slight. After the cake, Michael and I made our rounds, thanking guests and accepting congratulations. His parents pulled me aside during the dancing portion of the evening. "Clara, dear," Susan said, "I hope you know how much that gift means to us to give. We've watched you sacrifice so much for your family, and we wanted you to have something that represents your independence." "It's perfect," I said, meaning every word. "I can't thank you enough." "You don't need to thank us," Robert added. "You're family now, and family takes care of each other, without keeping score." The contrast with my own family's transactional approach to relationships couldn't have been starker. Robert and Susan gave because they loved me, not because they expected something in return. As the evening wore on, I noticed my parents huddled in conversation with Alice near the bar. Occasionally, one of them would glance in my direction, and I could practically see the strategy session taking place. They were regrouping, planning their next approach. It came during the bouquet toss. As single women gathered on the dance floor, Mom appeared at my elbow. "Clara, have you thought about what we discussed earlier?" "Yes," I said simply. "And?" "The answer is no." Mom's carefully composed expression cracked slightly. "Excuse me?" I said no, I'm keeping the car. "Clara, don't be ridiculous. We've already told Alice she can have it. She's planning her commute around having reliable transportation. Then you shouldn't have made promises about something that wasn't yours to give." The music stopped, and I turned to throw my bouquet. Jennifer caught it, laughing and immediately trying to hand it off to one of the younger bridesmaids. The moment of levity felt surreal against the backdrop of my family drama. When I turned back around, both my parents were staring at me with expressions I'd never seen before. Shock, anger, and something that looked almost like fear. "We'll discuss this tomorrow," Dad said tersely. "No, we won't. The discussion is over." I walked away before they could respond, rejoining Michael on the dance floor. But I could feel their eyes boring into my back for the rest of the evening. The real confrontation came an hour later as guests were beginning to leave. Alice approached me while Michael was saying goodbye to his college friends. "Clara, Mom told me you're being difficult about the car." "I'm not being difficult. I'm keeping my wedding gift." Alice's mask of sisterly concern slipped, revealing the entitlement underneath. "Come on, Clara. You don't even need a car. You live close to work, and Michael has a car." "Alice, I've been taking 3 buses to work for 8 years. I think I've earned the right to my own transportation. But I need it more than you do. My new job is a real career opportunity. Image matters in advertising." There it was again. The assumption that my life, my job, my needs were somehow less important than hers, that I existed to facilitate her success. "You know what, Alice? Figure it out yourself, like I had to." Her eyes widened in genuine surprise. Apparently nobody had ever suggested she solve her own problems before. "Clara, what's gotten into you? This isn't like you." She was right. The old Clara would have caved by now, would have convinced herself that Alice's needs were more important, would have handed over the keys with a smile and told herself it was the right thing to do. But the old Clara had died somewhere between, "She deserves it more than you do," and standing next to a man who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. Maybe it's time you got to know the new me, I said. The honeymoon in Costa Rica was a revelation. For 7 days, I experienced what life felt like without the constant weight of other people's expectations. Michael and I hiked through cloud forests, lounged on Pacific beaches, and talked about our dreams for the future. Not once did my phone ring with a family emergency or a request for money. You seem different here, Michael observed as we watched the sunset from our resort balcony on the last night. Different how? Lighter, like you're not carrying the world on your shoulders. He was right. Being completely disconnected from my family's demands had shown me how much energy I'd been expending just managing their expectations. For the first time in years, I felt like myself, but reality was waiting when we returned home. 17 missed calls from my mother, 12 from Alice, and a string of increasingly aggressive text messages. Clara, call me immediately. We need to discuss your selfishness. Your sister is crying. I hope you're happy. This is not how we raised you. Michael is turning you against your family. That last message made my blood boil. The idea that my husband was somehow corrupting me, rather than simply supporting my right to make my own decisions, revealed everything I needed to know about how my family viewed my marriage. Michael read the messages over my shoulder as I scrolled through them. They're blaming me for your backbone, he said wryly. Apparently thinking for myself is a foreign concept they can only attribute to outside influence. Are you going to call them back? I considered the question seriously. The old Clara would have called immediately, apologizing for worrying them and trying to smooth things over. But the new Clara, the one who'd emerged over the past week, had a different idea. Eventually, but not today. Instead, I spent the day unpacking, doing laundry, and settling back into our apartment. Michael had moved in 2 months before the wedding, and coming home to our shared space felt like stepping into the life I was meant to live. Pictures from our engagement and wedding decorated the walls. Books we'd bought together filled the shelves. Wedding gifts were still stacked on the dining room table, waiting to be properly organized. Among the gifts was a card from Robert and Susan with the title and registration for my new car. Seeing my name on the official documents, Clara Patterson, filled me with a strange sense of pride. It was mine, legally and morally. No amount of family pressure could change that fact. The next morning, I drove my new car to work for the first time. The commute that usually took an hour and 15 minutes by bus took 22 minutes door to door. I arrived at the office early, relaxed, and actually excited about the day ahead. Jennifer noticed immediately. Look at you, she said when I walked into the office. Married life agrees with you. It's not just married life. It's having a car. I forgot what freedom felt like. Have you talked to your family yet? No, and I'm not sure when I will. Jennifer nodded approvingly. Good. Let them stew for a while. Maybe they'll realize they went too far. But I was beginning to understand that my family didn't operate with that level of self-reflection. In their minds, they were the injured parties. I was the one who had violated the unspoken rules of our relationship by prioritizing my own needs. The phone call came that evening while Michael and I were cooking dinner together. Clara. Mom's voice was ice cold. I think it's time we had a conversation. Hello. Mom. How are you? Don't you hello mom me. Do you have any idea what you've put this family through? I looked at Michael, who was chopping vegetables with unnecessary force. Even he was getting tired of my family's drama. What exactly have I put you through? Alice started her new job yesterday. Do you know how she got there? She had to take 2 buses and walk 4 blocks in heels. She was nearly late on her first day because of your selfishness. Alice's transportation problems were now somehow my responsibility. The logic was so twisted I almost laughed. Mom, Alice is a grown woman with a college degree and a good job. I'm sure she can figure out how to get to work. Clara, I don't know what's happened to you, but this isn't the daughter I raised. You're right, I said quietly. The daughter you raised would have given Alice the car by now. She would have apologized for having the audacity to want something for herself. She would have made everyone else's problems her own. And what's wrong with that? Family is supposed to come first. Family is supposed to care about each other. When was the last time any of you asked how I was doing? When was the last time you celebrated my achievements? When was the last time you considered what I might want? Silence on the other end of the line. That's what I thought, I said. I have to go, Mom. Dinner's ready. I hung up before she could respond. 3 weeks later, Alice showed up at my apartment unannounced. I was working from home that day, so when the doorbell rang at 2 in the afternoon, I wasn't expecting anyone. She stood in my hallway looking disheveled and upset, a far cry from her usual polished appearance. We need to talk, she said without preamble. Come in, I said, stepping aside. She walked into my living room and immediately spotted the car keys on the counter. Her expression hardened. So you're really going to keep it? Yes, Alice. I am. Do you know what the last 3 weeks have been like for me? I gestured to the couch, but she remained standing, arms crossed defensively. Tell me. I've been taking public transportation to my new job. Do you know how exhausting that is? How unprofessional it makes me look when I show up sweaty and frazzled? The irony was almost too much to bear. Alice was describing the exact reality I'd lived for 8 years while supporting our family. The reality she'd watched me endure without a second thought. Actually, I do know exactly how exhausting and unprofessional that is. I lived it for nearly a decade. That's different. How? You're used to it. I'm not. There it was. The fundamental difference in how we viewed ourselves and each other. Alice genuinely believed she deserved better treatment than I did, simply by virtue of being Alice. You're right, I said calmly. I am used to it. I'm used to sacrificing my comfort for this family's benefit. I'm used to putting everyone else's needs before my own. I'm used to being taken for granted. Clara, that's not, but I'm not going to be used to it anymore. Alice's composure finally cracked. Fine, keep the stupid car, but don't expect me to forgive you for this. I don't. What? I don't expect you to forgive me. Honestly, Alice, I don't think we have much of a relationship to salvage. When was the last time you called me just to see how I was doing? When was the last time you thanked me for anything I've done for this family? When was the last time you showed any interest in my life that wasn't related to what I could do for you? She stared at me, speechless. I'll tell you when. Never. Not once in our adult relationship have you treated me like a sister instead of a resource. That's not true. Name one time. The silence stretched between us. Alice opened her mouth several times as if to speak, then closed it again. I thought so, I said. Clara, you're being ridiculous. Of course I care about you. Caring about someone and caring about what they can do for you are two different things. Alice's face flushed red. You know what? Fine. If that's how you feel, then maybe we shouldn't be sisters anymore. The threat that once would have sent me into a panic of apologetic backtracking barely registered. Instead, I felt a strange sense of relief. Maybe we shouldn't, I agreed. Alice stared at me in shock. This wasn't going according to her script either. In her world, threatening to withdraw her affection was supposed to bring me to heel. I don't understand what happened to you, she said finally. I grew up, Alice. I realized I deserve better than being treated like the family ATM. Nobody treated you like an ATM. Really? When was the last time you contributed to mom and dad's expenses? I just started my career. You graduated 3 years ago. I was getting established. With money I provided. That's what family does. No. Alice, that's what I did. You took. There's a difference. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her trying to reframe the narrative in her head, trying to find a way to make herself the victim in this scenario. Michael really has changed you, she said finally. Michael didn't change me. He just showed me what it feels like to be valued for who I am, instead of what I can provide. Alice gathered her purse and headed for the door. At the threshold, she turned back. Mom and Dad are really hurt, you know. They'll survive. Will they? Dad's talking about taking on more debt to help me buy a car. His back can't handle going back to construction, but he's considering it because of your selfishness. The manipulation was so transparent it was almost insulting. Dad was going to sacrifice his health because I refused to sacrifice my wedding gift? And somehow that was my fault? Alice, you have a job now. You can get your own car loan. With what credit? You know I don't have any credit history. Because I'd been paying for everything. Because she'd never had to be responsible for her own financial decisions. Then maybe it's time you started building some. I closed the door gently but firmly, leaving Alice standing in the hallway. Through the peephole, I watched her stand there for several minutes, probably expecting me to open the door and apologize. I didn't. The final confrontation came 2 months later at Dad's birthday dinner. Mom had called to invite us, and after discussing it with Michael, I'd decided to attend. I missed my father despite everything, and I thought maybe enough time had passed for us to find some middle ground. I was wrong. The dinner started pleasantly enough. Dad seemed genuinely happy to see me, and we talked about his physical therapy progress and my work projects. For a few minutes, it felt like we might be able to move past the car situation. Then Alice arrived, and the temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. She'd brought her new boyfriend, a guy named Trevor who worked in finance and clearly came from money. He drove a BMW and wore a watch that probably cost more than my monthly salary. Trevor, this is my sister Clara, Alice said with forced cheerfulness. The one I told you about. Trevor shook my hand politely, but I caught the look Alice gave him. Whatever she'd told him about me, it wasn't flattering. Throughout dinner, Alice made pointed comments about her transportation struggles, how exhausting her commute was, how embarrassing it was to show up to client meetings looking disheveled, how some family members couldn't be counted on when you needed them most. Michael's jaw got tighter with each passive-aggressive jab, but I found myself strangely calm. Alice's attempts to make me feel guilty were bouncing off me like rain off a windshield. The explosion came during dessert. "Clara," Mom said in her sweetest voice, "Alice has some wonderful news to share." Alice beamed, suddenly looking like the golden child she'd always been. "Trevor and I are moving in together. He's offered to help me buy a car so I won't be dependent on unreliable family members anymore." The dig was obvious, but what bothered me more was the pattern. Alice had found another person to solve her problems for her. She'd never learned to stand on her own feet because someone had always been there to catch her when she fell. "That's great, Alice," I said sincerely. "I'm happy you found a solution." "Yes. Well, some of us have to look outside the family for support," she replied, her mask slipping slightly. "Alice," Dad warned, but she was just getting started. "I mean, it's funny how someone can claim to love their family but refuse to help when it really matters." "Alice, that's enough," Michael said firmly. "Oh, the supportive husband speaks," Alice shot back. "Tell me, Michael, do you enjoy turning my sister against her family? I enjoy supporting my wife's right to make her own decisions, even when those decisions hurt the people who raised her. Especially then, if those people have been taking advantage of her generosity for years." The words hung in the air like a bomb about to explode. "Taking advantage?" Mom's voice was dangerously quiet. "Mrs. Henderson, Clara has financially supported this family for nearly a decade. She sacrificed her education, her social life, and her independence to keep you afloat. The least you could do is respect her right to keep her own wedding gifts." "How dare you?" Dad said, standing up from the table. "How dare you come into our home and judge us?" "I'm not judging anyone, I'm stating facts." "Michael, stop," I said quietly, but he was past caring about diplomacy. "Do you know what Clara was doing while Alice was in college? Working 2 jobs to pay for Alice's dorm and meal plan. Do you know what Clara was doing while Alice was spring breaking in Cancun, covering your mortgage payments? Do you know what Clara was doing while Alice was building her social media presence, building a career that could support all of you?" "We never asked her to," Mom began. "You never had to ask. You just expected, and Clara delivered because that's who she is. But now she's married to someone who values her, and suddenly you can't manipulate her anymore." The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Dad spoke. "I think you should leave." "Gladly," Michael said, standing up. I remained seated for a moment, looking around the table at my family. Dad was red-faced with anger. Mom looked like she'd been slapped. Alice was crying crocodile tears into Trevor's shoulder. These people, who were supposed to love me unconditionally, were treating me like a traitor for the crime of wanting something for myself. "You're right," I said quietly, standing up. "We should leave." "Clara, wait," Dad said, his voice softer now. "Don't let him turn you against us." I looked at my father, this man who'd raised me, who'd taught me to ride a bike and helped me with my homework, and walked me down the aisle just 3 months ago. "Dad, he didn't turn me against you. You did that all by yourselves." And then I said the words that had been building inside me for months. "I'm done. I'm done being the family bank. I'm done being taken for granted. I'm done sacrificing my happiness for people who don't even see me as a person." "Clara?" "You don't mean that," Mom said desperately. "I do mean it. The financial support stops now. The constant availability stops now. The guilt trips stop now." I took Michael's hand and walked toward the door. "If you decide you want a relationship with me based on mutual respect and genuine affection, you know how to reach me. But if you just want your personal ATM back, don't bother calling." We left them sitting at the dinner table, probably for the first time in years, forced to confront the reality of what they'd done to their relationship with me. The drive home was quiet. Michael held my hand while he drove, letting me process what had just happened. "How do you feel?" he asked finally. "Free," I said, and meant it. That was 2 years ago. The silence from my family lasted 6 months, the longest period of my adult life without contact from them. During that time, I discovered what my life looked like when I wasn't constantly managing other people's crises. I finished my bachelor's degree, taking evening classes while working full-time. Michael supported me through every exam and assignment, celebrating my achievements like they were his own. When I graduated summa cum laude, his parents threw me a party. My own parents didn't even send a card. I got promoted to senior developer, with a salary increase that reflected my actual value to the company. For the first time in my adult life, I had disposable income, money I could spend on things I wanted instead of other people's needs. Michael and I bought a house. Not a mansion, but a cozy 3-bedroom with a garden and a 2-car garage. We painted the rooms together, chose furniture that reflected our taste, and created a space that was entirely ours. The first contact from my family came through Jennifer, of all people. Apparently, Alice had reached out to her, trying to get information about my life. Alice was struggling financially. Trevor had dumped her after 6 months, leaving her with a car payment she couldn't afford and credit card debt from trying to maintain a lifestyle above her means. She asked if you might be willing to help her out. Jennifer told me over lunch. I told her she had some nerve. What did she say to that? That family is supposed to forgive and forget. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Convenient how that works when she needs something. The direct contact came a month later. Mom called, her voice carefully neutral. Clara, I think it's time we talked. I agree. Could you come to dinner this weekend? Just family. Will you be asking me for money? Clara, it's a simple question. Mom, are you inviting me because you miss me or because Alice needs something? A long pause. Both. I had to give her credit for honesty, even if it wasn't the answer I wanted. Then my answer is no. Clara, Alice is really struggling. She can't make her car payments and she's behind on her credit cards. She might have to move back home. That sounds like a problem Alice created for herself. She's your sister. A sister who told me we shouldn't be family anymore, remember? I'm just honoring her wishes. She was upset. She didn't mean it. Actually, Mom, I think she did mean it. And I think it was the most honest thing she ever said to me. Another long pause. What would it take for you to forgive her? The question caught me off guard. I'd been expecting manipulation, guilt trips, emotional blackmail. I wasn't prepared for direct negotiation. A genuine apology would be a start. Acknowledgement of how she treated me. Understanding of why I made the choices I made. And proof that she's learned to be responsible for herself. And then you'd help her? Mom, I didn't say anything about helping her. I said that's what it would take for me to consider having a relationship with her again. But Clara, if you don't help her, she'll lose everything. Then maybe she'll learn the lesson I learned at 19, that when you lose everything, you find out what you're really made of. We talked for another hour, but it was clear we were at an impasse. Mom wanted the old Clara back, the one who absorbed everyone's problems and fixed them with money and sacrifice. That Clara was gone, replaced by someone who valued herself enough to set boundaries. The breakthrough came 6 months later when Dad called. Not Mom, not Alice, but Dad himself. Clara, I owe you an apology. Those 6 words nearly knocked me over. Dad, I've been thinking about what you said at my birthday dinner, about how we treated you, and I think you were right. I sat down heavily on my couch, not trusting my legs to hold me up. I'm listening. Your mother and I, we got so used to you solving our problems that we forgot you were our daughter, not our employee. We forgot that you had dreams and needs of your own. Tears started flowing before I could stop them. And Alice? We spoiled her. Clara. We let her think the world owed her something because she was charming and pretty. We didn't teach her to work for what she wanted because you were always there to provide it. Dad, I'm proud of you for standing up to us. It took guts to do what you did, and I should have said that 2 years ago. We talked for 3 hours that night. Really talked. Maybe for the first time since I was a child. Dad told me about his struggles with feeling useless after his accident. How my financial support had saved his pride but damaged his relationship with me. He told me about watching Alice spiral into debt and realizing that they'd failed her too by not teaching her self-reliance. Mom called the next week with her own apology. Less eloquent than Dad's, but genuine. She admitted that she'd always been jealous of my independence and intelligence and had unconsciously tried to keep me dependent by making me indispensable to the family. Alice took longer. Her apology, when it finally came, was grudging and incomplete. But it was a start. Today, 3 years after that disastrous birthday dinner, my relationship with my family is different. Smaller, more careful, but based on actual affection rather than obligation. Dad and I talk once a week about his freelance consulting work and my latest projects. Mom and I exchange recipes and gardening tips. Alice and I are polite but distant. We may never be close, but we're no longer enemies. The car that started it all is still in my garage, now with over 50,000 miles on it. I've driven it to job interviews, grocery stores, date nights with my husband, and weekend trips to visit friends. Every time I get behind the wheel, I remember the moment I chose myself. Michael and I are expecting our first child in the fall. We've already decided that this baby will grow up knowing their worth isn't tied to what they can provide for others. They'll learn the difference between helping and enabling, between generosity and self-sacrifice. My wedding gift wasn't just a car. It was a symbol of people who valued me for who I was, not what I could do for them. When my family tried to take that away, they were really trying to take away my sense of self-worth. I'm grateful they failed. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever struggled with family expectations or learned to value yourself, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories about finding your worth and setting boundaries. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is refusing to enable their worst instincts. Remember, you can't control how others treat you, but you can always control what treatment you're willing to accept. And sometimes saying no to others is the first step to saying yes to yourself.